Preview of what you can see in the Chinese New Year parade. Major international golf tournament will be held in the city next month. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Chief Executive John Lee visited the traditional village of Lamson in Tai Po today and threw his fortune card onto the famous wishing tree. He also gave early greetings to Hong Kong residents for the Year of the Dragon. Mimo Singhai reports.
This was Lam Tsuen Youth Centre in Tai Po this morning. More than 100 senior citizens gathered together to eat pun choi, a traditional Cantonese feast served in a big bowl. The event was joined by Chief Executive John Lee. He lunched on the same table as the senior citizens and looked after them by putting food into their bowls. The CE said he wanted to wish everyone good health for the Year of the Dragon, adding the dragon symbolizes energy and luck. Speaking of Lam Tsuen, many will think of the well-known wishing tree and the ritual of throwing fortune cards onto the tree. It is believed if a wish lands on the tree and does not fall off, the wish will come true. After writing his wish, the CEO threw his fortune card, which successfully hung onto the tree. Speaking to the press, Lee introduced the Lam Tsuen Wishing Night Bazaar, an event which will run between today and next Tuesday, organized by the government as part of the Day and Night Vibes campaign. A highlight of the night market is that residents can throw glowing oranges onto the wishing tree. Visitors can also try out locally produced dairy products from a city university farm. Farm staff said they hope a kind of neighborhood connection can be made between the products and Lam Tsuen. 20,000 of 30,000 people are expected to visit the 7-day night market. Mims 9, TVB News.
A Chinese New Year parade will be held in Tsim Sha Tsui on Saturday evening, the first day of the Chinese New Year. The event will include 9 floats and around 30 teams of performers from both Hong Kong and abroad. Special traffic arrangements will be in force.
The Hong Kong Tourism Board organized a preview of the parade this afternoon. The designs of the 9 floats follow a dragon theme and symbolize the joyful atmosphere of the new year. Besides 13 local teams of performers, the program will be joined by 16 teams coming from places ranging from Tibet to Australia and the US. The event sets the record for the number of teams participating. The parade begins at the Hong Kong Cultural Center on the evening of the first day of the Lunar New Year and will pass through Canton Road, Haiphong Road, and Nathan Road before ending at Sheraton Hotel. During the Chinese New Year period, there will be special traffic arrangements. Several areas in Tsim Sha Tsui and Central will be cordoned off owing to the parade on Saturday and fireworks performance on the 11th. Measures will also affect private cars traveling across the border at the Shenzhen Bay Port and Lok Ma Chau control point. This as the police and the transport department discuss providing temporary cross-border bus services at the J1 and J2 exits of West Kowloon Station on Saturday. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The LIV golf tournament will be held at the Fanling Golf Course between the 8th and 10th of next month, and is set to attract spectators from more than 20 countries to the city. The government will lease the reclaimed part of the golf course to the Hong Kong Golf Club to facilitate the tournament. It is estimated more than 10,000 people will visit during the event. Additions or remodeling work on the premises will be made by the Hong Kong Golf Club according to the demands and needs of the event organizer. The SAR marks the 3rd stop of the tour this season and a first for Hong Kong. Lionel Messi's Inter Miami are currently playing against Vissel Kobe in Japan, just days after Messi's no-show in Sunday's match in Hong Kong. Messi is playing now. Messi, who said his absence from the SAR game was due to inflammation in the adductor, started as a substitute in the match. As of now, the Consumer Council received at least 830 complaints involving over $5.5 million related to the Argentine footballer's failure to play in Sunday's match. Timothy Lee tells us more.
The match between Lionel Messi's Inter Miami and Japanese team Vissel Kobe is underway in Japan. Yesterday, Messi was all smiles when he embraced former Barcelona teammate Andres Iniesta. Messi started as a substitute in the Japanese game, while Luis Suarez, Jordi Alba, and Sergio Busquets started the match. Meanwhile, many people in Hong Kong are still outraged by Messi's no-show for Sunday's game at the Hong Kong Stadium. Responding to an inquiry by TVB News, Inter Miami said Messi wanted to play and understood the disappointment SAR residents must feel. The American club also issued an apology. The team said the two-star footballers were listed as substitute players and that it was only decided in the last moment that they could not play, stressing that they must prioritize the health of their players. Inter Miami said they will gladly return to the SAR in the future if the club is still welcomed. But some sports specialists found Messi's injury being a reason for his no-show hard to believe.
我哋好難理解到4日
Patrick Lau from Hong Kong Baptist University's Department of Sport, Physical Education and Health said he is skeptical that the Argentine could not perform simple moves on the pitch because of his injuries. This, as lawmaker Michael Tian called Messi's actions in the city insulting, after Messi appeared to apologize while in Japan but not in Hong Kong.
He could have said all that in Hong Kong. Instead, he chose to do so in Japan. The reason he gave was that he has a muscle pain in the thigh. That can explain that he can play in Hong Kong. But he was not present on the field, carried in on a stretcher and carried out on a stretcher. He walked in. If you are able to walk, you should be able to stand up and receive a trophy, and you should be able to hold a mic and move your lips and say something. So that, to me, he is adding insult to injury.
Tian also offered some suggestions for handling a similar situation in the future.
The contract that government will sign with the organizer is that all the gate receipts will be held in a deposit through some intermediary. The minute he finished 45 minutes of play during that game, in total, that money is released to the organizer and the team. If he played 1 minute less, right, all the money goes back to the people who pay for the tickets.
Timothy Lee, TVB News.
In the U.S., an appeals court in Washington ruled former President Donald Trump can stand trial after being accused of unlawfully trying to overturn the 2020 election. This after the court denied Trump's claim that he is immune from prosecution. This report from NBC.
Former President Donald Trump today dubbed Citizen Trump by a 3-judge panel in Washington, ruling Mr. Trump is not immune from prosecution. The court saying we cannot accept that the office of the presidency places its former occupants above the law for all time thereafter. The Trump campaign saying he'll appeal the decision. Trump himself bemoaning the ruling, saying a president of the United States must have full immunity in order to properly function and do what has to be done for the good of our country. Special counsel Jack Smith charged Mr. Trump last summer for his efforts to reverse the 2020 election results and stop the peaceful transfer of power.
We will never give up. We will never concede.
Mr. Trump's legal team has been trying to get the charges tossed out for months, arguing he should be completely immune from prosecution for any acts he took as president. The court today unpersuaded, saying we cannot accept former President Trump's claim that a president has unbounded authority to commit crimes that would neutralize the most fundamental check on executive power, the recognition and implementation of election results. The Trump campaign capitalizing on the court's decision today with a fundraising plea, as the Republican frontrunner frequently uses his legal setbacks as fuel for his latest White House bid.
If you have a president that doesn't have immunity, he's never going to be free to do anything because the opposing party will always indict him as soon as he leaves the White House.
With today's ruling, Mr. Trump's only hope at avoiding trial is for the Supreme Court to find he is immune, which would have major implications in the other legal cases he faces as well.
Still ahead, investigation finds shocking error after a Boeing plane's door blew off. Britain's Prince Harry meets King Charles after the King's cancer diagnosis. Hong Kong's General Chamber of Commerce thinks the time is right to legislate for Article 23. Welcome back. In the U.S., aviation investigators say they have found the cause of last month's Alaska Airlines incident in which a door panel blew off soon after takeoff, forcing the aircraft into an emergency landing. The National Transportation Safety Board said bolts that helped secure the panel to the frame of the Boeing 737 MAX 9 were missing. Without the bolts, nothing prevented the panel from sliding upward and detaching from stop pads that secured it to the airframe. The incident has added to questions about manufacturing quality at Boeing that started with the deadly crashes of two MAX 8 jets in 2018 and 2019, killing 346 people. Speaking before the U.S. House Transportation Committee, the head of the Federal Aviation Administration said Boeing will be held accountable for any violations of safety regulations.
We've begun an audit of Boeing's production and quality control practices, and we've informed Boeing that the FAA will not grant any production expansion of the MAX until we're satisfied the quality control issues uncovered during this process are resolved. Boeing employees are encouraged to use our FAA hotline to report any safety concerns.
There has been a landmark ruling concerning gun violence in the U.S. The mother of a son who carried out a murderous mass shooting has been found guilty of manslaughter for failing to stop him. Jennifer Crumbley could spend the rest of her life behind bars in a decision which could have implications for cases elsewhere in America. Her son Ethan Crumbley, now 17, is already serving a life sentence for murdering 4 classmates at a school in Michigan in 2021. The verdict was delivered live on television.
On count 1 of involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Crumbley, 45, showed little emotion as the other 3 guilty verdicts followed at the court in Michigan. Prosecutors and the families of children killed say justice was done after Crumbley bought the gun for her son days before the shooting. Sentencing will take place later. Each count carries a possible 15 years in prison. Her husband and Ethan's father, James, faces a similar trial in March and has pleaded not guilty. Palestinian group Hamas has responded to the latest truce proposal put forward by mediators Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is today in Israel, trying to complete the deal to end 4 months of fighting that has claimed more than 27,000 lives in Gaza and 1,200 in Israel. Obstacles remain, with Hamas demanding Israel end its offensive as Israel wants absolute victory in Gaza. Nazvi Karim has more.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arriving in Israel after whirlwind visits to Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Qatar. While in Doha, Qatar Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman announced that Hamas had responded in a generally positive way to their latest truce proposal. Without offering details, Blinken said he would discuss the response with Israeli leaders.
Together with Qatar and Egypt, we put forward, as you know, a serious proposal that was aimed at not simply repeating the previous agreement, but expanding it. As the Prime Minister just said, Hamas responded tonight. We're reviewing that response now. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we continue to believe that an agreement is possible and indeed essential. And we will continue to work relentlessly to achieve it.
According to reports, the deal calls for a ceasefire for at least 40 days and the release of more than 100 hostages still held by Hamas. Hamas said in a statement it responded in a positive spirit, but wants a comprehensive and complete ceasefire. In Washington, U.S. President Joe Biden was equally reluctant to give much away.
There's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas. But it seems to be a little over the top.
Meanwhile, in Rafah, the last refuge for Palestinians after being told to evacuate other places, paramedics say 4 people were killed in a raid on a house by Israeli forces. In nearby Khan Yunis, residents say an Israeli strike on an apartment building killed a couple and 4 of their 5 children. Israel's military released footage of what it said was a strike on a suspected Hezbollah observation post in
Britain's Prince Harry flew from Los Angeles to be with his father, King Charles, after learning Charles has cancer. King Charles was briefly seen in public for the first time since it was announced he is receiving treatment for cancer. Along with his wife, Queen Camilla, they drove into Buckingham Palace, returning from a meeting with Prince Harry. Charles's second son has been estranged from the royal family, living in California with his wife Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Harry met with Charles for 45 minutes. It was their first face-to-face talk for some months. The palace have not said what type of cancer Charles has. Doctors found a different problem when he received prostate treatment last week. Later, the King and Queen left Buckingham Palace by helicopter on their way to Sandringham after seeing Harry, whose autobiography Spare, released last year, upset many in the royal family.
There are some very, very deep hurts that he has inflicted on the family and that Meghan has, and some, some wounding, extremely wounding words. King Charles is by nature, he wants to heal not only the world, but I think his impulse would be to try and heal the family.
The European Union has shelved green anti-pesticides proposals in a concession to farmers after weeks of protests. That's a U-turn in a major green policy. It is not certain this will be enough to appease all farmers who say they are struggling to make a living. David Garrett reports.
Anger still burns for European farmers. The Spanish joined protests similar to ones already seen in Belgium, Germany and the Netherlands, to name a few. Spain became another EU member state where tractors were blocking major roads. These protesters clogging up a motorway linking Barcelona to much of Spain. They are angry in part about EU plans to halve pesticides use by 2030 to achieve environmental targets. Agricultural workers say these restrictions would affect their farming and livelihood as well as food production in Europe. It is just one of many concerns for the rural community that have prompted them to move tractors from the fields to the highways. They say they are already being squeezed by high costs and cheap imports. In Eastern Europe, Bulgarian farmers joined in too. They have rejected government support, which were considered insufficient after losses suffered because of the war in Ukraine. Overall, farmers across Europe are angry with their own politicians or the EU. Chairman of Agricultural Producers, Ventsislav Mitkov, said to demonstrators, "The last 3 years have been a kind of hell. We are surviving on the edge." After weeks of demonstrations in multiple countries, the EU Commission has shelved pesticide quotas. It had been part of their green plan. Use of pesticides can release greenhouse gases contributing to climate change, although it could handcuff farmers.
Has been rejected by the European Parliament. There is no progress anymore in the Council either. So we have to do something. And that is why I will propose to the College to withdraw this proposal.
It could be seen as a U-turn by the EU, but it might not go far enough for these French smallholders staging a rally outside of the European Parliament in Strasbourg. These farmers demand fair pricing, continuing tax reductions on diesel and controls on imports from non-EU countries. Their colleagues across the border in Italy welcomed the move by the EU on pesticides. These farmers near Rome said it shows colleagues across Europe are working together to get results. As for the EU's 2030 climate targets, these protesters, who had threatened to march on Rome if they did not get their way, say they know the land better than anyone. David Garrett, TVB News.
Back locally, the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce said they support the legislation of Article 23. The Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce, or HKGCC, today held an indoor conference to discuss the legislation of Article 23. 13 foreign chambers of commerce and representatives of international companies joined. Secretary for Justice Paul Lam and Secretary for State Chris Tang were invited to explain the legislation. The HKGCC believe it is now a suitable time to pass Article 23 because not doing so could create a legal barrier for the city. This is the 25th day of the national security trial of former media tycoon Jimmy Lai. Former associate publisher of Apple Daily, Chan Pui-man, said Lai instructed Apple Daily to focus its coverage on youngsters who stormed the Legislative Council. Armed police continued patrolling outside the West Kowloon Law Courts as Lai was taken to the trial by prison van. The prosecution today asked Chan Pui-man about news coverage on the Legislative Council incident on July 1st, 2019, when protesters stormed the LegCo building. Chan said Lai wanted Apple Daily to focus on reporting the sentiment of youngsters who went inside LegCo. Chan added Lai had hoped the public would understand and support the behavior of those youngsters if more news coverage was made on the sentiment aspect. That is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.